99% of people lose in high-stakes negotiations for one singular fatal reason. And that reason is they falsely believe that kindness is what actually wins the deal. I mean, if you ask the average person what makes someone highly persuasive, you always hear the same tired adjectives. They'll say things like, oh, they're friendly, they listen well, they're polite.
Right, the classic polite salesperson trope. It's what everyone is taught from day one. But today we are completely tearing up that conventional playbook. We're looking at a fascinating video from an Arabic YouTube channel called Kamsa Tamul.
Yeah, which translates to 5 meditations, right? And the whole mission of today's deep dive is to explore this really wild premise they present. They argue that the ruthless, pragmatic political strategies written by Niccolo Machiavelli over 500 years ago map perfectly onto modern sales. We're talking about his book, The Prince, which is just wild to think about in an everyday context.
It really is somewhat unnerving when you dig into it, because they propose these strategies aren't just for 16th century monarchs. They map flawlessly onto everyday persuasion and basically how you get what you want in life. It completely reorients how you think about human interaction.
Absolutely. And I want to emphasize right up front that this isn't about like robotic corporate sales training. It's really about controlling perception and engineering desire. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, let's get into it. And just to be super clear with you, the listener, we're not endorsing the politics here or taking any moral sides. We are just neutrally deconstructing the underlying psychological mechanics that make these tactics so incredibly effective. We just want to look at how the human brain responds to this stuff.
Exactly, just looking at the raw mechanics. So the source makes it clear that to engineer someone's desire, you first have to control the playing field. And you have to do this before the target even realizes the game has started. Let's put you, the listener, in the hot seat for a second.
Oh, this is a great exercise. Put yourself in the shoes of someone selling a service. The naive approach, the so-called kind approach, is to present your service for, say, $10,000. And then you just step back.
Right. You step back and you ask an open-ended question. You say something like, so what did you decide? Or does this work for your budget? Which feels polite because, you are respecting their autonomy, right? You're giving them space.
It feels polite, yeah, but psychologically, you've just push the buyer into a state of total cognitive overload. The human brain actually struggles to evaluate numbers in a vacuum. $10,000 has no inherent meaning until it's compared to something else.
Wait, really? So just giving them one number is actually a bad move?
Oh, absolutely. By leaving the choice completely open, you force their brain to search for its own comparisons. They start wondering, is your competitor cheaper? Or should they wait a month? Or do they even need this at all?
Oh, wow. So you've basically just handed them an unstructured void of options. That makes so much sense. The Machiavellian approach, according to the video, is to meticulously design the choices instead.
What's fascinating here is how it mirrors Machiavelli's advice that a smart ruler gives people the illusion of freedom. You design it so that whatever path the client takes, they arrive at your exact destination. The video demonstrates this using what's called the anchoring effect.
Right, the anchoring effect. So instead of floating that $10,000 offer in a vacuum, you present 2 highly specific options. You look the client right in the eye and say, we have our premium package for $15,000. And you add that it includes like lifetime technical support and an extended warranty.
Exactly. And then you introduce the standard package for $10,000. But here's the trick. You actively downsell. You personally recommend the $10,000 option, stating it is the most suitable for their specific needs.
Which is so clever. Because the underlying mechanism there relies on those cognitive anchors. That $15,000 option might not even be a product you expect anyone to buy. It's just a decoy.
Yeah, a total decoy. Its sole neurological purpose is to establish a high watermark in the buyer's mind. Once that $15,000 number anchors their perception of value, the $10,000 option stops looking like a massive expense. It suddenly looks like a remarkable bargain.
The objective reality of the price never even changed. Only their perception of reality was engineered. It honestly reminds me of taking a kid bowling, but you secretly put the bumpers up in the gutters.
That is a perfect analogy. You hand the kid the ball and you let them line up their shot.
Yeah, you let them physically throw it down the lane. And they feel this massive surge of agency and power because they think they're in complete control of the game. But you have rigged the physical environment so the ball is mathematically guaranteed to hit the exact pins you want.
Exactly. The client walks away feeling incredibly empowered, thinking they made a really shrewd financial choice, and they're completely unaware that you designed the entire architecture of their decision. It's a perfectly constructed illusion of freedom.
But, merely setting up an engineered choice doesn't actually close a deal. An option just sitting on a table is static. Human beings naturally gravitate toward the status quo because, well, making a decision expends mental energy.
Right, we are inherently lazy decision makers. To force movement, you need a catalyst. You need an engine that overrides their natural inertia.
And the engine this source identifies is where things get genuinely Machiavellian. The video pulls one of the most infamous quotes from the prince. "It is better to be feared than loved."
Which sounds completely unhinged at first glance, right? Applying a 16th century political threat to selling software or negotiating a salary, it sounds wildly aggressive.
It really does. But you have to look at the evolutionary biology of the human brain. We are fundamentally wired for loss aversion. Like, our ancestors who prioritized finding an extra bush of berries didn't necessarily pass on their genes.
No. The ones who survived were the ones who prioritized running away from the rustling sound in the bushes, the ones who feared a fatal loss. Because of this evolutionary hardwiring, human beings they'll drag their feet for days to gain something positive.
But if you threaten to take away something they feel they already possess, or if you introduce a looming threat, they'll move at absolute lightning speed. A client does not buy when they feel safe and comfortable.
Never. They pull the trigger when they feel the acute danger of missing out. The fear of loss is the true catalyst here. And the video outlines 3 escalating tactics to manufacture this exact urgency.
Right, let's go through those. First is scarcity. But you don't just say, we're running low. You get hyper-specific. You say, I only have 2 of these left in the regional warehouse, and the next shipment faces a 3-week delay.
That specificity is exactly what hacks the brain. Broad claims trigger a buyer's skepticism. But highly specific numbers and timelines bypass the brain's critical filter entirely. It paints a vivid, immediate picture of a penalty if they fail to act.
Yeah, a 3-week waiting period is a real penalty. The second tactic is social proof, specifically leveraging FOMO. You casually drop a line like, a customer came in this morning and bought 2 of these without even hesitating.
And that is designed to make the buyer feel intellectually insecure. They suddenly think, wait, if that guy bought 2 without blinking, he clearly understands a hidden value that I'm missing. If I pass on this, I am the fool.
It elegantly shifts the burden of proof, doesn't it? The salesperson is no longer sweating to prove the product's value. The buyer is now internally sweating, worried that they lack the insight to see what's supposedly obvious to everyone else.
Absolutely. Then there's the third tactic, which is making the threat time-bound. You tell the client, listen, company policy dictates that the price goes up by $2,000 tomorrow morning, and you frame it as, I'm trying to catch you before the increase hits.
Okay, but let me push back on this for a second. Put yourself in the buyer's shoes. If I'm sitting across the table from someone who is relentlessly terrifying me with scarcity and phantom buyers and price hikes, my instinct is flight. I want to run away from them.
Which is a totally fair point. How do you maintain trust while holding a metaphorical ticking clock, right? That tension is exactly why the third tactic is a masterclass in manipulation. Look really closely at the framing of that time-bound threat.
Oh, right. The salesperson is not the source of the fear.
Exactly. The salesperson positions themselves as the savior rescuing you from the fear. The threat is external. It's a faceless, greedy corporate bureaucracy that's raising the prices tomorrow. The salesperson leans across the table and acts as your personal ally trying to shield you.
So they manufacture the panic, but they expertly disguise it as deep personal care for your well-being. You literally light the house on fire, but you get to wear the fireman's hat and carry them out of the building. That is just wild.
It's brilliant, though. But to pull off that savior disguise, you need an unshakable foundation of baseline trust. The buyer has to believe you actually care. If fear is the engine driving the transaction, trust is the steering wheel keeping it on the road.
Which brings us to this crucial concept the source calls strategic authenticity. And it's rooted in another Machiavelli observation. Everyone sees what you appear to be, few know what you really are.
The biggest mistake amateurs make is trying to sound perfectly polished. When someone has a slick, rehearsed answer for every single question, our neurological defense mechanisms just light up. We inherently distrust perfection.
We trust vulnerability. But the Machiavellian twist here is that vulnerability is being weaponized. You're not being honest for the sake of virtue. You are deploying honesty as a tactical tool to lower the buyer's drawbridge.
Precisely. The channel provides this brilliant example of downselling to achieve this. Let's say the buyer is looking at a high-end model, expecting you to push for the maximum commission. Instead, you say, look, I wouldn't recommend the expensive package for you.
Right, you tell them it has features they'll never use. You say, let's go with the smaller model. It's much more practical. Think about what that does to the buyer's internal schema. We all have a mental script of how a salesperson acts, right? Pushy, greedy, relentless.
And when you actively talk them out of spending more money, you shatter that script. The buyer's brain just short circuits. They immediately conclude that you aren't motivated by commission, which means you must be motivated by their best interests.
In a matter of seconds, you've bypassed their suspicion radar. You've established absolute credibility. And the video highlights a second method for this that is even more fascinating. It's about voluntarily admitting a minor flaw in your own product.
Yes, before the client even notices it. You look at them and say, honestly, it's a bit heavy, but nothing beats its durability.
Here's where it gets really interesting. This is the exact same dynamic as B-Rabbit in the final rap battle of the movie 8 Mile. Have you seen that?
Oh, absolutely. It's the perfect comparison. By listing his own flaws on stage, his poverty, his struggles, his embarrassing background, he completely strips his opponent of their ammunition.
He weaponizes his own weaknesses. When it's finally his opponent's turn to speak, the guy just stands there in silence. Because B-Rabbit already aired out all the dirty laundry. By bringing up the product's weight, the minor flaw, you neutralize the objection before it can be used against you.
It signals to the buyer that you are an objective truth teller. And because you just volunteered an uncomfortable truth, any bold claim you make after that point is swallowed whole. When you say it has unbeatable durability, they accept it as gospel.
You have successfully hacked their trust filters. But human self-preservation is pretty stubborn. Even with the illusion of choice, the catalyst of fear and strategic authenticity, a buyer will still throw up defensive walls.
Inevitably, yeah. They might point blank say $5,000 is a huge amount. And if you handle this direct objection the wrong way, the entire Machiavellian structure collapses.
So how do you handle it without losing the high ground? The source tackles this through the concept of framing. Whoever sets the lens or the frame of the conversation wins the game.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, power does not lie in objective reality. It lies in how that reality is perceived. If a client says, $5,000 is a huge amount, and you get defensive, you've lost.
Right, because you've allowed the client to establish the price frame. You're now playing defense. But the Machiavellian seller reframes reality entirely. They don't argue the fact of the $5,000.
No, you can't change the objective cost. So you shatter their frame and build a new one. You divide that $5,000 over a 5-year lifespan. It becomes roughly $2.70 a day.
And then comes the pivot. The seller asks, is your daily comfort, time, and productivity worth less than a cup of tea? It beautifully shifts the seller out of a defensive posture and right into an offensive one.
Completely. You are no longer defending your product's price. You are actively challenging the buyer's valuation of their own comfort. You force the buyer to justify why they won't invest loose change into their own success.
Inside this new frame, their original objection doesn't just look wrong, it looks irrational. You've altered the landscape of the negotiation without ever formally disagreeing with them. But what if you do all this and the client still hesitates?
The ultimate stalling tactic. They hem and haw, stare at the contract, and won't pull the trigger. The natural instinct, the amateur instinct, is to lean in and push harder. You're so close to the finish line, right?
Yeah, you just want to force the close. But Machiavelli advises the exact opposite. The video cites this quote, "Never attempt to win by force what can be won by deception." The source claims 99% of salespeople fail right here.
Because they show desperation. They let the target see that they need the outcome. The ultimate power move in this moment is to calmly, politely pull back. You just drop the rope.
You literally walk away. You pack up your materials and say, I feel this might not be the right time for you. Maybe you need to do more research. No pressure. I'm here when you're ready.
Think about the psychological whiplash this causes. It's like a heated game of tug-of-war. Both sides are pulling with all their might. If you suddenly let go of the rope, the other person violently stumbles forward.
But the client panics. They start wondering why the seller doesn't want their money. The dynamic instantly flips. So what does this all mean? Is this simply the business equivalent of playing hard to get?
It really is, but on a much deeper level. It taps into the primal human desire to desperately want whatever is suddenly made unavailable. The seller becomes the prize, and the buyer begins chasing them.
The buyer starts trying to prove they're ready to buy. They're essentially closing themselves. It is just stunning to see how a 500-year-old treatise translates so seamlessly onto a modern sales floor.
The source openly admits these tactics are a form of manipulation. There's no sugarcoating it. But their counterargument is that almost every interaction in modern society involves a degree of manipulation.
Yeah, every commercial, every discount code, every pitch you encounter is a manipulation of your emotions. Life itself is a continuous process of buying and selling. You are selling your ideas, your value, and yourself every single day.
Exactly. And by understanding these raw 500-year-old principles, you stop being a pawn in the game. You're no longer blindly reacting to the bumpers on the bowling lane. You elevate yourself above it, armed with this psychological awareness.
You finally see the board clearly. Which leaves us with a deeply provocative thought to leave you, the listener, with today. If these dark psychology tactics are so flawlessly effective because they exploit fundamental human nature, what happens when two people sit across the table and both are fully aware of these exact principles?
That is the ultimate paradox. Do they just cancel each other out into pure, unavoidable honesty? Or does it just become an infinite, invisible loop of manipulation?
Where neither person ever truly reveals their real hand. It is absolutely something to think about before your next big meeting. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll catch you next time.